Press your hand into a raised bed that looks mulched, and you can feel the problem before you see it. A few pale strands of straw are scattered across the surface, but dark soil is still showing between them. By morning, the bed looks protected. By mid-afternoon, the surface is hot, the seedlings are tired, and the water you added yesterday seems to be gone. The mistake is simple. The mulch is present, but it never became a layer. That is the part most gardeners miss. Mulch is supposed to protect a raised bed. It is supposed to soften the heat, slow the drying wind, reduce crusting, and keep the root zone from swinging so hard between wet and dry. But one common mulch mistake lets heat and water loss creep right through. The mistake is treating mulch like a topping. A little straw sprinkled here, a few wood chips tossed there, a thin dusting of shredded leaves around the plants. From a distance, it looks like the bed has been covered. Up close, the soil is still exposed in hundreds of tiny windows. And every one of those windows is a place where sun, heat, and wind can keep working on the bed. A raised bed can look mulched and still behave almost bare. That matters because raised beds already have a different rhythm than in-ground soil. They warm faster. They drain faster. Their sides are exposed to more air. In a good season, that can be useful. In a hot, dry stretch, it can become a problem. The surface heats up, the top inch dries out, and the gardener starts watering more often without understanding why the bed never seems to hold on. The strange part is that the gardener may blame the compost, the watering schedule, or even the plants. The lettuce wilts by 3 o'clock, so it looks like a water problem. The tomato leaves curl in the afternoon, so it looks like a plant problem. The surface turns pale and dusty after watering, so it looks like bad soil. But often, the first failure is sitting right on top. The mulch was too thin to interrupt the drying process. A real mulch layer works because it changes the conditions at the soil surface. It shades the soil. It slows moving air. It cushions the impact of watering and rain. It gives the top of the bed a cooler, quieter zone where moisture does not leave as quickly. It does not stop drying completely. Nothing does. But it can slow the daily loss enough that the soil below stays more stable. Thin mulch cannot do that well. If you can easily see large patches of bare soil between the pieces, the sun can see them too. If wind can move across the surface without meeting much resistance, evaporation continues. If the material is so sparse that it looks more like decoration than cover, the bed may still dry in almost the same pattern as an uncovered bed. This is why one gardener says, "I mulched and it did nothing." They may be telling the truth. But what failed was not the idea of mulch. What failed was the layer. The second mistake is uneven coverage. This happens a lot in raised beds because gardeners are trying to be careful. They do not want to bury seedlings. They do not want to cover the crown of a plant. They do not want to invite rot near the stem. Those are good instincts. But the result is sometimes a bed with little islands of mulch and wide bare lanes between plants. The bed looks tidy. The plants look framed. But the soil is not protected as a system. It does not politely attack only the bare spots. Bare spots become hot spots. Hot spots dry first. Dry spots shrink, crust, and shed water more easily. Then the next watering does not soak evenly. Some areas take water. Some areas repel it for a moment. Some areas are cooled. Some areas stay hot. Once you see it this way, the symptom makes sense. You water the whole bed, but the bed does not dry as one whole bed. It dries in patches. The exposed strips between plants lose moisture first. The soil beside the wooden edges may heat faster. The thin areas under scattered straw dry sooner than the thicker corners. Then roots grow through a bed that is not equally comfortable from one area to the next. The plant shows the symptom. The surface holds the clue. The third mistake is using the wrong mulch for the moment. Not every material behaves the same way. Clean straw can make a loose, airy cover. Shredded leaves can work well when they are not packed into a wet mat. Partially broken down leaf mold can shade the soil and blend into the bed over time. Fine compost can help feed the surface. But a thin layer of compost alone is not always the same as mulch in hot weather. It can dry, crust, and become another exposed surface. Fresh grass clippings are one of the easiest materials to misuse. A light, thin scattering can break down quickly. But a thick wet pile can mat together, smell sour, heat up, and block air and water movement. If the lawn has been treated with herbicides, those clippings do not belong in a vegetable bed at all. Wood chips can be useful in paths, around perennials, and in some bed systems, but in a vegetable raised bed, they should be used with judgment. A coarse surface layer is different from mixing a lot of fresh woody material into the root zone. On top, it shades and protects. Mixed heavily into the planting soil, fresh woody material may temporarily tie up nitrogen near the surface as it breaks down. The fix is not to fear mulch. The fix is to match the material to the job. For most planted raised beds, you want a mulch that is loose enough for water to pass through, thick enough to shade the soil, and clean enough that it does not bring a new problem with it. Straw, shredded leaves, pine needles in the right setting, aged wood fines, or a mixed organic mulch can all work when used with care. The exact best choice depends on your crop, climate, and what you can get locally. But the principle does not change. A mulch layer only protects a raised bed when it actually becomes a layer. That means the first step is not throwing mulch down. The first step is preparing the surface it will protect. Pull the weeds first. If weeds are already rooted under the mulch, they will keep competing quietly. Break up any hard surface crust with your fingers or a small hand tool, but do not turn the bed into dust. Then water the soil before you mulch, especially if the bed is already dry. Mulch is better at helping soil hold moisture than at magically rehydrating dry soil from above. This is where most gardeners get misled. They put mulch over a dry bed, water lightly, and assume the problem is solved. But the water may only dampen the mulch and the very top of the soil. Underneath, the root zone can still be dry. That is why the test matters. Lift the mulch. Push your finger or a small trowel about 2 inches into the soil. If it is dry at that depth, the bed needs water. Not a quick sprinkle. It needs a slow watering that actually reaches below the surface. After watering, lift the mulch again and check. If the mulch is wet but the soil underneath is still dry, the water has not reached the place the roots need it. That one check can save a lot of guessing. Once the soil is moist, build the cover evenly. For many raised beds, a loose layer around 2 to 3 inches deep is a useful target, with adjustments. Use less around tiny seedlings. Use less if the material is very fine and tends to mat. Use less in cool, wet weather or in a bed that already drains slowly. Use a fuller layer when plants are established and the weather is hot, bright, and windy. The goal is not maximum thickness. The goal is working thickness. Too little mulch fails because it leaves the soil exposed. Too much mulch can fail in the opposite direction. A deep, heavy, wet blanket can slow air movement, hold too much moisture near stems, and make watering harder to judge. If the bed smells sour, if the mulch stays slimy, or if water runs sideways instead of soaking through, the layer is not helping the way it should. And keep mulch off the stems. Do not pack it against tomato stems, pepper stems, bean crowns, lettuce crowns, or the base of young transplants. Leave a small breathing space around each plant. The mulch should protect the soil around the root zone, not wrap the plant like a wet collar. Think of it like a donut, not a volcano. That image is often used for trees, but the idea applies in a smaller way inside the raised bed. Cover the soil. Do not bury the base of the plant. If your bed is already planted, you do not need to start over. Work slowly by hand. Tuck mulch between plants in small amounts. Build the layer from the open spaces inward. Around small seedlings, use a lighter cover until they gain size. Around established plants, fill the bare spaces more completely while keeping the stems clear. Then watch the bed for 3 signs. First, look at the color of the soil under the mulch. It should stay darker and cooler longer than the exposed soil used to. If it turns pale and dusty by afternoon, the layer may still be too thin, too patchy, or not letting water reach the soil. Second, watch how the bed accepts water. Good mulch should soften the watering, not shed it. If water beads, runs, or sits in the mulch without moving down, lift the layer and loosen it. A matted layer may need to be fluffed, thinned, or replaced with a coarser mix. Third, watch the plants during the hottest part of the day. Some temporary wilting can happen in heat, especially with large leaves and intense sun. But if the same bed collapses every afternoon while the soil 2 inches down is dry, that is not just a dramatic plant. That is a moisture storage problem showing itself through the leaves. The wrong response is to keep sprinkling the surface. A shallow sprinkle may make the mulch look wet while the root zone stays thirsty. It may even train you into a frustrating routine. Water, wilt, water, wilt, water again. The bed is not asking for more panic. It is asking for a surface that loses less and watering that reaches deeper. And, yes, there is a timing issue. In early spring, a heavy mulch layer can keep soil cooler than you want, especially for warm season crops. If the bed is still cold and you are trying to warm it for tomatoes, peppers, beans, cucumbers, or squash, do not rush to bury the surface under a heavy blanket. Let the soil warm first. Once the plants are growing and heat becomes the bigger threat, then mulch becomes more valuable. In summer, the mistake flips. Gardeners wait too long. The bed bakes, the surface crusts, and the first real mulch layer goes down after the soil has already been stressed for weeks. By then, mulch can still help, but it has to be paired with a deep reset watering. Otherwise, you are covering a dry sponge and hoping it fills itself. The best time is usually after planting, after the soil has warmed enough for the crop. after seedlings are established enough not to be buried, and before the harshest heat makes the surface unstable. That is the quiet skill. Not mulch as decoration. Mulch as timing, thickness, material, and coverage. A good mulch layer does not need to look perfect. It needs to function. It can be made from simple material. It can be cheap. It can be a little uneven in color. It does not need to look like a bagged landscape bed. But when you lift it, the soil underneath should tell you the truth. Cooler, darker, less crusted, easier to water, less exposed. That is when mulch is doing its job. The payoff is not that you never water again. That would be false. Raised beds still need attention, especially in hot weather. The payoff is that the bed stops losing moisture so quickly from the surface. The root zone has a better chance to stay steady. Compost and fertilizer have a better environment to work in. Roots are not living under a roof with holes in it. And the gardener stops chasing symptoms quite so much. The same watering goes farther. The same compost behaves better. The same bed feels less frantic. Not because mulch is magic, but because the soil surface is no longer being left open to the hardest part of the day. Look again at that thin scattering of straw where the dark soil shows through. At first, it looks like the gardener did the right thing. They added cover. They tried to protect the bed. They followed the advice. But now you can see the difference. A few pieces of mulch are not the same as a mulch layer. Coleva o cada varmas, o casares la que era leis, o caso é rivinha. O casares las ulasama ao monas faze seres esle. Já sire que quintes nós sama ra. Em que var marbitra. Por coze não tal montes. E vor parderil. Posso murmar, once at justing donas. Was a nudira faz ele bateres em parque ato consugigem a torquim bem, do inamas zeros. E o joqui fachei de a pregrina.
What pitão dondas na church alera fazem dominação.